The Life and Lessons of Saint Francis of Assisi. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live a life of complete simplicity, renouncing all riches and comforts to find a greater purpose? What if there was someone who, through gestures of humility and love, could touch the hearts of millions of people over the centuries? This is the legacy of Saint Francis of Assisi, one of the most beloved saints in history. His life, marked by compassion, unconditional love for animals and deep connection with nature, brings us powerful and timeless lessons. In this video, we will dive into the fascinating trajectory of Saint Francis of Assisi, from his carefree youth to his radical transformation in a man who has chosen to live in poverty to serve God and his neighbor. His lessons on humility, empathy, and respect for all life forms are more relevant than ever in today's world, and can help us re-evaluate our own spiritual journey. Get ready to know a story that will inspire and transform your way of seeing life. If you seek to connect more deeply with spirituality and learn from one of the greatest examples of faith and devotion, you cannot lose this content. Take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and share this video with whom you believe you also need these lessons. Now, let's start our journey through life and the lessons of Saint Francis of Assisi. San Francisco and his spiritual transformation. The story of Saint Francis of Assisi begins with a life of privileges. Born in 1181 in the city of Assisi, Italy, he was the son of a rich family of traders. From an early age, Francisco showed interest in luxurious life and parties. However, this path of excess was interrupted by an inner crisis, leading him to question the true meaning of life. This process of questioning and seeking the truth approached God and distanced him from material wealth. The conversion of San Francisco occurred gradually. After participating in battles and facing difficult times, he had a mystical experience that completely turned his worldview. Upon hearing God's voice in prayer, Francis understood that his call was to serve the poor and live in simplicity. One of the great lessons of this spiritual transformation is the pursuit of humility. Saint Francis abandoned his noble robes and decided to live among the poor, noting that true wealth is in the soul, not material goods. San Francisco's humility was not just a life stance, but an act of surrender to God. He believed that, as we undressed with pride and attachment to worldly things, we approach the divine. In a society increasingly focused on consumerism and appearances, San Francisco's lesson is more relevant than ever. True peace and happiness are not in the goods we accumulate, but in the way we connect with God and our neighbor. Another interesting aspect of its transformation was the search for inner silence. In a bustling and noisy world, Saint Francis teaches us the importance of silencing the mind to hear the voice of God. He often retired to lonely places, such as forests and mountains, to meditate and pray. This teaching is an invitation to, in the midst of modern chaos, to find moments of peace and reflection, connecting with spirituality. The story of San Francisco also makes us reflect on the importance of listening to our call. Many times we are so stuck with social and material expectations that we ignore what God truly wants for us. Saint Francis's courage to abandon a comfortable life to follow his divine purpose is an inspiration for us to have the boldness to live according to our spiritual mission. With his conversion, Saint Francis teaches us that life is a constantly evolving spiritual journey. He inspires us to be faithful to what we believe, regardless of the challenges that may arise. Have you ever stopped to reflect on what is your call in life? If you are enjoying this content, subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. The love of San Francisco for animals and breeding. One of the most striking features of Saint Francis of Assisi is his deep love for animals and nature. He believed that all creatures were divine works and therefore deserved respect and care. San Francisco via in each animal a manifestation of God's love for creation, and its example teaches us the importance of treating all living beings with dignity. San Francisco not only loved the animals, but also talked to them. Several stories report episodes in which he preached to birds or calmed fierce wolves. One of the most famous tales is the city of Gubbio, where a wolf was terrorizing the population. Saint Francis, with his sweetness and faith, was able to tame the animal only with kind words and compassion. He saw in the wolf a creature that, like humans, was also part of God's creation and deserved respect and care. This Saint Francis stance invites us to reflect on our own relationship with animals. In a world where we often treat them as objects, their lessons call us to rethink our attitudes. He reminds us that each living being plays an important role in the balance of nature and that by respecting them we honor the Creator. This message connects directly with the growing awareness of animal rights and the need to preserve the environment. In addition to his relationship with animals, Saint Francis also had a deep view of the connection of all beings with the earth. He referred to nature as a sister nature, in a demonstration of his humility before creation. This perspective echoes in modern movements of sustainability and care for the planet, and calls us to protect Earth as our common house, a concept that had lived centuries before becoming a global agenda. San Francisco also demonstrated a unique sensitivity in realizing that care for nature is a way of praising God. He saw the beauty of divine creation in every tree, river, and mountain, and this fed his spirituality. For him, the natural world was not just a scenario, but an extension of God's own love. This view challenges us to leave a posture of exploration to a reverence and gratitude for nature. The famous prayer of the Song of Creatures, written by Saint Francis, expresses this profound connection. In it, the saint praises God for Brother Sol, Sister Moon, and Sister Agua. This hymn of praise not only celebrates the creation, but invites us to be responsible for taking care of it. In times of climate crisis and environmental destruction, their words become even more urgent, reminding us that we are guardians, not owners, from the earth. San Francisco's lessons about animal care and nature are more than a simple love for wildlife. They are a spiritual call for us to see the world around us with the eyes of compassion and respect, recognizing the intrinsic value of all God's creatures. Have you ever wondered how your actions impact the world around you? If you are enjoying these reflections, subscribe to the channel and share this video with those who need to hear these lessons. Humility as a path of holiness. Humility was one of the most exalted virtues by Saint Francis of Assisi. From his conversion, he understood that to truly approach God, it was necessary to renounce pride and the desire for power. This radical detachment to material things and worldly glory was a deep mark of his spiritual journey, and his actions reflected this constant pursuit of humility. One of the most symbolic passages of his life was the moment when Francis, still young, decided to return all the riches of his family and even his clothes to his father before the city of Assisi. This gesture was not just a material renunciation, but a public sign that he had decided to follow a totally new path based on voluntary poverty and service to others. From that moment on, he started wearing simple clothes and living as a begging, demonstrating that his only wealth was faith in God. For San Francisco, true humility was not only in renouncing possessions, but always putting himself at the service of others, especially the poorest and marginalized. He taught his followers, the Franciscan friars, not to consider themselves superior to anyone, even when they preached or helped the needy. On the contrary, they should see each other as the smallest of all. Francis understood that spiritual greatness is serving with a pure heart, without expecting rewards or recognition. This example of humility leads us to reflect on how we live our own lives. In a world often obsessed with status, fame, and accumulation of goods, San Francisco's life is an invitation to rethink our priorities. He teaches us that when we give up our ego and our vanities, we become freer to live a life truly dedicated to love and service. Another important lesson in San Francisco is about humility in relation to creation. He never saw himself as superior to other living beings or nature. On the contrary, he treated all creatures as sisters and brothers, living in harmony with the world around them. His humility in the face of creation inspires us to adopt a more respectful and grateful stance on the planet and all life forms. Prayer and meditation were also a fundamental part of this humility. Francis was spending long periods in solitude and prayer, not seeking great answers or miracles, but simply wishing to be in communion with God. He recognized that in our smallness we can only approach the divine as we emptied ourselves. His life of contemplation and simplicity shows us that true greatness is in the ability to be small before God. The humility of San Francisco was not passive. He believed that the act of humiliating was, in fact, a way of praising the glory of God. By placing himself in the last place, he allowed God to occupy the first in his life. And this is a lesson that echoes to this day. When we practice humility, we make room for the divine presence to manifest itself in our lives. Have you ever thought about how humility can transform your way of living and relating to the world? If this content has touched you, subscribe to the channel and share with others who can be inspired too. Voluntary poverty as a way of liberation. Saint Francis of Assisi lived in a time marked by great social disparities, where accumulated wealth and status were synonymous with power. However, contrary to what was expected of someone born in a wealthy family, he chose a radically opposite way: voluntary poverty. This was one of the most striking aspects of his life and one of his main spiritual lessons. For Francis, poverty was not an imposition or punishment, but a means of liberation and approach with God. When he decided to renounce the goods of his family, San Francisco did so consciously, embracing simplicity and stripping. He believed that material wealth creates barriers between human and divine. The incessant search for goods and comforts distracts us from our true spiritual mission, which is to serve others and seek a life of fullness in God. By abandoning everything, Francisco found an inner freedom that allowed him to completely devote himself to prayer, service, and fraternity. This choice of voluntary poverty was not just an external renunciation, but an inner attitude. For San Francisco, poverty was a way of emptying itself of everything that was not essential, so as to leave room for God's presence in his life. He understood that by clinging less to the material, we become more available for love, service, and communion with the Creator. In his view, being poor of goods was to be rich in spirit. Saint Francis also taught that, when choosing poverty, we were not only getting rid of things, but also joining ourselves with the poorest and most marginalized of society. He lived among the lepers, the beggars, and the needy, not as a distant benefactor, but as a brother. His fraternity was not theoretical, it was a practical and daily experience of solidarity. He did not consider himself superior to the poor who served, but equal to them. This is a powerful lesson on human dignity, which transcends social position or possession of goods. The decision to live in poverty also reflected San Francisco's search for greater confidence in divine providence. He believed that by renouncing material guarantees, he fully trusted God to meet his needs. This did not mean inertia or passivity, but a radical surrender in the hands of God, living the present with gratitude and faith. Confidence in providence was, for Francis, an act of love and faith that freed him from worldly concerns. Today, in a consumerist society, where the value of a person is often measured by what they have, the lessons of San Francisco become increasingly relevant. He challenges us to question our priorities and reflect on what really matters. Does the incessant search for status, goods, and comfort bring us to true happiness? Are we not, as he warned, distancing ourselves from God and our neighbor when we cling to these things? Finally, San Francisco's example also leads us to think about the concept of detachment. He invites us to re-evaluate our relationship with possessions and to understand that true wealth is in the heart, not in things. Detachment, for him, was a way of connecting ourselves to what is eternal, to free from the currents of materialism and to live more fully and authentically. Have you ever wondered how detachment and simplicity can transform your life? If this teaching has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. Deep connection with nature. Saint Francis of Assisi is widely known for his unconditional love for nature, which he considered a visible manifestation of God's creative power. For him, nature was not just a background of human life, but an extension of the divine work, full of deep spiritual meanings. This love for creation expressed itself in its reverence for all the elements of the natural world, from the simplest grain of sand to the most majestic of animals. One of the most impressive aspects of this connection with nature is the way Francis saw the world as a large family. In his famous Song of Creatures, He referred to the sun, moon, water, and wind as brothers and sisters, recognizing in them the presence of the Creator. This vision is an invitation so that we also see creation not as something to be explored, but as something to be cared for and loved. At a time when the planet faces environmental crises, San Francisco's words are a powerful reminder of our responsibility to protect the Earth. San Francisco's respect for all life forms led him to a unique relationship with animals. Stories tell him that he preached to the birds and was able to calm fierce wolves with his kindness. These narratives are not only legends, but reflect the deep inner peace he has achieved and how this peace expanded to beings around him. For him, animals were not inferior, but part of a divine order that deserved the same respect given to humans. Saint Francis' connection with nature can also be seen in your choice of places to pray and meditate. He used to withdraw to forests and mountains, seeking the silence and tranquility of creation as a way of approaching God. For him, nature was the place where the divine presence could be more strongly felt. This teaching inspires us to seek moments of contemplation in nature, slowing down the frantic rhythm of modern life to rediscover simplicity and peace. San Francisco also teaches us that taking care of creation is a way of praising God. He saw in the preservation of the environment an act of devotion, for him all that was created by God was sacred. This view echoes in the current movements of eco-theology, which seek to integrate spirituality with ecological awareness, promoting a healthy and sustainable relationship between the human being and the planet. Saint Francis' ecological spirituality is also a call to simplicity. He understood that the more we detach from material excesses, the more we become aware of the real needs of the world around us. The excessive exploitation of natural resources, unbridled consumption, and the destruction of the environment are largely the results of excessive attachment to materialism. San Francisco invites us to live with less, so that everyone, including future generations, can have more. Finally, his love for nature leads us to reflect on our own relationship with the environment. We are taking care of the creation as we should? Are our actions contributing to preserve or destroy the world that God has entrusted to us? San Francisco's life challenges us to adopt a more conscious and responsible stance, recognizing that each act of care for nature is ultimately an act of worshiping the Creator. Have you already reflected how you can live more harmoniously with nature? If this teaching inspires you, subscribe to the channel and share this video with who can also benefit from these reflections. Life in Community and Fraternism of San Francisco. Saint Francis of Assisi understood that the spiritual journey should not be lived in isolation. He deeply believed the importance of community life and the value of fraternity, both among his brothers of faith and with all human beings. In founding the Order of the Minor Friars, also known as the Franciscans, he took a crucial step in formalizing this vision of community, where simplicity, service, and brotherhood were at the center of the Christian life. The idea of fraternity, for San Francisco, went far beyond a simple coexistence. He understood that all human beings, regardless of their social class, should be treated as brothers and sisters. In a highly hierarchical world, where social divisions were deep, Saint Francis lived and preached a message of equality. He believed that true communion with God could only be achieved when everyone was treated with dignity and respect, without distinction of wealth, status, or power. The relationship between the friars was based on a servant leadership. San Francisco did not consider himself superior to his followers, and often performed the humblest tasks within the community. He believed that spiritual leadership should be lived by example, not by the imposition of authority. This view of service is an invitation to rethink how we deal with power and leadership in our lives, whether in our community, family, or work. Within this fraternity, the love of neighbor was central virtue. For San Francisco, love should not be reserved only for those who are close to us or who benefit us in some way, but for all, especially the poor, sick, and marginalized. He lived this truth by taking care of the lepers, people who at the time were totally excluded from society. His gesture of kissing a leper, something unthinkable for his time, symbolizes the degree of surrender and compassion that he believed to be necessary to live a truly Christian life. In addition, the community life proposed by San Francisco was marked by deep sharing. All the friars had was shared among all, without any individual accumulation of goods. They lived on donations, depending entirely on the providence of God and the generosity of people. This community lifestyle leads us to reflect on the concept of solidarity today. In a society that values both individuality and personal accumulation, the example of San Francisco calls us to live more collaboratively and generously. Life in fraternity was also a form of mutual support for spiritual growth. The friars were not only together to divide material resources, but also to help themselves in their journeys of faith. They prayed together, worked together, and advised each other. Francis believed that the community was a space where each one could strengthen themselves spiritually, correct their mistakes, and grow in holiness. He reminds us that spirituality is something that can and should be lived together as part of a larger body. Finally, Saint Francis teaches us that true fraternity transcends religious, cultural, and social boundaries. He kept dialogues with people of other religions, such as in the famous meeting with the Sultan of Egypt during the Crusades, in which he demonstrated deep respect and desire for peace. For Francisco, love and respect for others were universal and should be applied to everyone without exception. Have you ever thought about how you can practice more fraternity and service in your daily life? If these lessons touch your heart, subscribe to the channel and share this video so that more people can be inspired by the example of San Francisco. The value of forgiveness and peace. Saint Francis of Assisi lived in a time of great social, political, and religious conflicts. However, even in the midst of this environment of tension, he stood out as a great defender of peace and forgiveness. These two virtues have become pillars of their spirituality, and their pacifying attitudes left a legacy that continues to inspire millions of people around the world. Francisco showed us that the way to God necessarily goes through reconciliation and the love of neighbor, regardless of circumstances. One of the most emblematic demonstrations of this commitment to peace was his trip to the Middle East during the Crusades. While the Christian and Muslim armies faced himself violently, Francis made the unthinkable. He crossed the battle lines and went to meet the Muslim Sultan Al-Malik al-Kamil, not to fight it, but to dialogue and preach peace. Although his attempt to convert has not been successful, mutual respect between the two leaders has shown that dialogue, based on respect and understanding, is always possible, even in the most hostile situations. This episode also teaches us the importance of forgiveness as a path to peace. Saint Francis understood that, to live in peace with others, it was necessary to forgive, even when injured or wronged. He saw in forgiveness a form of liberation, both for those who forgive and for those who are forgiven. Francis' life invites us to set aside the hurts and resentments we carry, for they move us away from true inner peace and the love of God. San Francisco also preached peace in his daily actions. He believed that peace begins within each person, and that by cultivating them in our hearts, we can spread it around us. His simple and humble way of living inspired those who followed him to seek reconciliation and live in harmony. For Francis, peace was not an external achievement, but a state of mind, the result of a life centered on prayer and trust in God. Another inspiring example was his ability to promote peace in conflict situations. The story of how he calmed Gubbio's wolf is not just about the wild animal that was tamed, but about reconciliation between the wolf and the local community. Francigia not only calmed the wolf, but also brought peace among the residents, who lived terrified, and the animal. This event symbolizes the power of love and peace to transform even the most difficult situations. The message of peace of Saint Francis is also reflected in his most famous prayer, the Prayer of Saint Francis, where he asks God to make him an instrument of your peace. This prayer is a call to all of us so that we may be agents of peace in the world, starting with our daily relationships and attitudes. She reminds us that where there is hatred, we can sow love, and where there is offense, we can offer forgiveness. This message is an invitation to live in harmony with others, always seeking reconciliation and understanding. In times of polarization and social conflicts, Saint Francis' lessons on peace and forgiveness are extremely relevant. He shows us that despite differences and challenges, it is possible to live in peace, as long as we are willing to forgive and open our hearts to dialogue. The peace he preached was not passive, but active, based on concrete actions of love and reconciliation, both with others and with ourselves. Have you ever thought about how it can be a peace instrument in your daily life? If this message has resonated on you, subscribe to the channel and share this video with others who also need more peace in your lives. Prayer and contemplation in the life of San Francisco. Prayer occupied a central place in the life of Saint Francis of Assisi. He believed that communion with God could only be achieved through a deep life of prayer and contemplation. From the beginning of his spiritual journey, Francis has sought to always remain in constant dialogue with God, seeking in prayer the strength and guidance to live his mission. This deep connection with the divine was the source of their inner peace and their ability to love and serve others so genuinely. Saint Francis did not see prayer only as a formal practice or a religious ritual. For him, prayer was a way of living, a constant attitude of openness to the presence of God in all things. He believed that the creation, nature, and even the simplest tasks of everyday life could become a form of praise and contemplation, as long as they were made with a heart turned to God. This teaching invites us to see spirituality more integrated with our daily lives, recognizing that we can find the sacred at every moment, as long as we are attentive. The search for silence was one of the ways San Francisco used to deepen his prayer. He often retired to isolated places, such as forests and caves, where he spent long periods in meditation and communion with God. This retreat was not an escape from the world, but a reunion with the divine that strengthened him for his mission of love and service. In such a busy world as ours, Francis's example challenges us to find moments of silence and loneliness to cultivate our relationship with God, temporarily away from noise and distractions. In addition to silence, Saint Francis also valued simplicity in prayer. He believed it was not necessary to use complicated words or elaborate forms to connect with God. On the contrary, he taught that the most sincere prayer was that made with a pure and open heart, without pretensions or formalities. This simplicity of mind is an invitation for each of us to reassess its own way of praying, seeking more authenticity and less superficiality in our communication with God. Contemplation was also an essential part of his spirituality. Francis saw in everything an opportunity to contemplate the greatness and goodness of God. For him, nature was a continuous revelation of the Creator, and he was deeply touched by observing the beauties of the natural world. This contemplation led him to a state of deep gratitude and praise, something we can learn by developing more attention and appreciation for what surrounds us, seeing the divine in little things. Francis is also known for his prayer of intercession, not only by humans, but by all creatures. He was responsible for praying for peace in the world, the harmony between men and the preservation of creation. His intercession surpassed the barriers of selfishness, extending to the entire universe. This inspires us to pray not only for our personal needs, but for the needs of others and the protection of the planet we share. Finally, Saint Francis' prayer was also expressed in his famous prayer for peace, which, although not written directly by him, perfectly reflects the spirit of his life. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. This prayer sums up your desire to be a channel of God's love in the world, always seeking to bring harmony, forgiveness, and hope where there was discord, hurt, and despair. She challenges us to seek this same peace in our lives and to be agents of transformation in our own circles. Have you already reflected how you can deepen your prayer life and contemplation? If this message touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share this video to inspire other people. The legacy of San Francisco and its impact on the modern world. Saint Francis of Assisi, despite living in the 13th century, remains one of the most influential and inspiring figures in history. Its legacy transcends time and geography, echoing in hearts around the world, regardless of religious beliefs. Their lessons of humility, simplicity, love of animals and reverence for creation remain more relevant than ever in the context of today's society, marked by environmental crises, social inequality, and the incessant search for material success. One of the biggest impacts of San Francisco is in the way he redefined spirituality. By choosing a path of voluntary poverty and radical simplicity, He has shown us that true wealth is not in material possessions, but in the spirit. His life was a testimony that the pursuit of power and accumulation can move us away from God, and that true joy is to live simply and in harmony with others and with the world. This message resonates strongly at a time when consumerism seems to dictate the values of many. San Francisco also stands out for his vision of universal fraternity, something that has profound implications in today's globalized world. He believed that all human and non-human beings were brothers and sisters, part of the same divine creation. His attitude of respect and affection for the poor, marginalized and sick is a lesson that challenges modern individualism. Francisco invites us to build bridges of compassion and empathy, regardless of cultural, social, or religious differences. This spirit of fraternity was brought to a global level with Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si', which bears the name inspired by Saint Francis of Assisi. Published in 2015, the encyclical addresses the ecological and social crisis, appealing for a conversion global ecological. The central message is the same as Saint Francis, taking care of the earth as our common home and respecting all life forms. The Franciscan view of harmony between humanity and nature thus becomes an urgent call to all of us as we face environmental challenges and climate change. Another lasting aspect of the legacy of San Francisco is its influence on the peace and social justice movement. He deeply believed in the power of dialogue and reconciliation, even in times of war. His famous meeting with the Sultan Malik al-Kamil, during the Crusades, is a powerful example of his courage and his view of a world united by peace, not violence. This gesture of openness and mutual respect between different religions still serves as a model for modern efforts to build peace and interreligious understanding. Moreover, the Franciscan movement, which he founded, continues to flourish around the world, through religious and lay orders who follow his spirituality. Franciscans are present in numerous countries, working on social causes, promoting justice, care for the poor and the preservation of nature. This stream of social and spiritual action remains alive as a proof that San Francisco's teachings continue to inspire thousands of people to live a more authentic life focused on the common good. Finally, the legacy of Saint Francis also touches the hearts of many people outside the Christian tradition. His deep spirituality, respect for nature and love for all creatures are qualities that transcend religious and cultural barriers. It is admired by environmentalists, animal rights activists and all those seeking a simpler and harder life. San Francisco invites us to reflect on our choices and to seek a way of life that is more in tune with spiritual values and the care of the world around us. Have you ever thought about how Saint Francis' legacy can impact your life and the choices you make daily? If these reflections have inspired you, subscribe to the channel and share this video to spread these important lessons.